Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to look at what energetic blockages are through the lens of David Hawkins's work. This will help you understand how they operate, their effects on your life, and your interactions with your experiences, and make it easier to notice and release them. Energetic blockages are patterns of unresolved energy that restrict the natural flow of life. They are not abstract ideas, but real constrictions within the larger field of awareness that we live in. These blockages form when experiences are resisted, when the energy of a moment is not fully allowed, and instead becomes trapped. What remains are stored residues of unprocessed experience, and over time these accumulations shape how we perceive, react, and behave. In Hindu philosophy, this same phenomenon has long been described with the term samskaras. In that context, samskaras are the subtle impressions left in the mind by past experience, and they function in the same way as what Hawkins calls energetic blockages. Both perspectives point to the same dynamic. When experience is resisted, its energy is stored, and this stored energy continues to play itself out and influence life until it is consciously released. These blockages also keep us trapped in identification with the body, the brain, and the five senses. Yet the truth of who we are is much greater than this narrow lens of experience. As blockages dissolve, this becomes clearer. You begin to sense yourself not as confined to the body, but as a small expression within an infinite field of awareness. And the more you lean into this awareness, the less you feel compelled to control everything with your mind. Gradually, you begin to see that the field itself has always been guiding the movement of life. What once felt like your responsibility to manage is revealed as part of a much larger intelligence already at work. The ego's constant striving for control is what created the tension and resistance in the first place. When that grip loosens, life doesn't collapse. It actually flows with greater ease and clarity than the mind could ever orchestrate. When energy instead is resisted and becomes trapped, awareness contracts around it. That contraction draws attention to the physical and emotional layers where the blockage is stored. Instead of resting in the open field of awareness, consciousness narrows down to the sensations of the body, the narrow lens of the five senses, the activity of the brain, and the stories of the mind. Over time, this repeated narrowing convinces us that we are the body and the mind, because that is where awareness keeps being pulled. The more blockages are released, the more awareness is freed from this contraction, and the easier it becomes to recognize that the body and brain are simply expressions within a much larger field, not the whole of who you are. The stored energy, furthermore, acts like a gravitational pull, binding awareness to the level of survival, instinct, and conditioned thought. As you begin to release these blockages, that pull loosens. Awareness is no longer continually dragged down into the body-identified narrative. The nervous system, no longer carrying the same density of frozen energy, starts to quiet. And in that quiet, you glimpse the dimension of yourself that was always prior to the senses. In other words, blockages literally act as filters. Each knot is like a tinted pane of glass placed before awareness, distorting perception toward the personal story. When the pane is removed, awareness is not confined in the same way, and what you perceive is broader, lighter, less personal. The mind interprets this expansion as being a small part of an infinite field, but the field itself was always primary. Awareness was always present. What's important to understand is that every experience leaves an imprint on multiple levels at once, on the energetic field, in awareness, and in the physical body. These are not separate compartments, but different expressions of the same underlying reality. A tension you feel in the body is not just physical. It is also an energetic knot and a mental or emotional trace. In other words, these imprints show up on many levels at once, reflecting our multidimensional nature. For most people, the easiest way to notice them is in the body, as tension, aches, or tightness, often along the spine. They can also appear as emotions that seem to have no clear cause, or as restless thoughts that, on closer examination, are tied to those emotions. If you are sensitive to your energetic field, you may feel them as dense or pressurized knots that are linked to the body but not fully contained within it. To experience this directly is to recognize in a tangible way what we've been pointing to all along, that you are much more than your physical body and brain. When an experience is fully allowed, felt, processed, and integrated, it moves freely through, leaving clarity and openness behind. But when you resist, suppress, or contract against what is happening, that energetic movement halts. Hawkins emphasizes that this act of resistance is what creates the blockage, not the event itself. The energy that was meant to move is held in suspension, remaining active in the subtle field, ready to be triggered by future situations that resonate with its frequency. The yogic tradition notes the same thing in speaking of samskaras. Impressions remain until awareness allows their completion. The heart of the matter is energetic flow. The field of awareness is naturally open, vibrant, and fluid. In this natural state, emotions rise, complete their movement, and dissolve without leaving residue. As mentioned, blockages form when we interfere with this process by resisting what arises. This resistance is usually unconscious and most often rooted in fear or identification. Fear can take many shapes. The sense that an experience is too painful, threatening to our goals, our well-being, or the well-being of those we love. More often than not, the gravity of the situation is blown way out of proportion, and sometimes the fear is not even tied to reality, but to imagined scenarios or outcomes. In each case, fear interrupts the natural movement of energy, stopping it in place. The result is stored emotion that remains active until it is released. Identification is another form of interference. For example, if anger arises and you identify with it, you might think, "I am angry and justified in this anger." Instead of seeing anger as a temporary energetic surge, you fuse with it, defend it, and strengthen it. The anger then becomes part of your self-image. Identification can happen with pride, desire, resentment, or even excitement. Anytime awareness collapses into the passing experience, the energy gets bound instead of released. Let's step back for a moment, because there is something here that can easily go unnoticed. We have been conditioned to respond to experiences we label as negative in a very specific way, and most of us have never thought to question it. This conditioning is part of the human experience. Through socialization, we unconsciously adopt patterns of reaction that feel self-evident, as though there were no alternatives. Only when we begin to pay closer attention do we see that there are countless other possibilities available, though they usually remain hidden from us. One of the most deeply ingrained of these patterns is our reflexive tendency to interfere with the natural flow of life. Our knee-jerk reaction is often to assume that something is wrong with our experience. We believe it should not be happening, and so we struggle and resist in an effort to change or control it. Choosing a different response feels unsettling because it means stepping into the unknown. And even when the familiar way of reacting no longer works, the unknown is still interpreted as unsafe. Doubts arise. What if we lose face? What if things fall apart? What if we can't handle what comes next? Hawkins describes this reflex as the activity of the ego, the sense of being a separate self that clings to control and resists anything it deems threatening. Its only concern is survival, not freedom or growth. Yet the strategies it relies on were shaped for a much simpler world. In today's environment of rapid change, complexity, and constant stimulation, those same strategies often backfire, creating more struggle and reinforcing the very limitations we long to move beyond. Over a lifetime, the accumulation of frozen energy builds layers of contraction, creating the sense of heaviness, limitation, or even chronic emotional or physical pain that many people live with without understanding why. The yogic understanding of samskaras mirrors this. Impressions accumulate, reinforcing desires and aversions until they are dissolved by awareness. This brings us back to unconsciousness, and this is something that needs to be firmly understood. Our unconsciousness of what is really going on in our present moment experiences keeps us trapped, reliving the same types of experiences over and over again. Something triggering happens because we have blocked emotional energy in our energetic field that resonates with the experience. We then go unconscious and respond out of habit, which usually means that we continue suppressing the stored energy and act in a predictable manner in line with the script we have rehearsed so many times before. On the lower levels of Hawkins's map of consciousness, shame, guilt, apathy, fear, desire, anger, pride, the density of stored energy is greatest. These are the layers where resistance and identification are strongest, and where the ego finds its sense of self. At these levels, the nervous system is often locked in chronic patterns of fight, flight, or freeze, and life feels like a constant struggle. As you begin to release these blockages, the energy field becomes lighter and more coherent, and consciousness naturally rises to levels of courage, neutrality, willingness, and acceptance. One key insight is that blockages are not personal in the way we often believe. The specific content of the stored energy may come from personal experiences, but the mechanism itself is universal. Whenever experience is resisted or suppressed, energy becomes trapped. Recognizing this helps dissolve the shame or self-judgment that often arises when we notice these patterns. There is nothing wrong with you for having them. They are simply the natural outcome of unconscious resistance. In truth, everyone carries these blockages to some degree. Until we become aware of this dynamic, there is no way to recognize how much energy we are still holding through old patterns of avoidance and suppression. What matters is that you are beginning to see it now, and that awareness itself is the first and most crucial step toward release. Releasing blockages is not an incredibly difficult feat either. But, as you've probably understood, it cannot be done in the way that we are used to. It's not about effort, but willingness. The energy of resistance maintains the blockage, and the absence of resistance allows it to dissolve. This means that even deeply rooted patterns, repeated for decades, can release in an instant when they are fully allowed. Breakthroughs often feel sudden because energy bound for years finds freedom in a single moment of surrender. The practical path to dissolving these blockages begins with awareness. You notice the contraction, a tightness in the chest, a knot in the stomach, a surge of heat or restlessness. And instead of distracting yourself, analyzing, reacting, or projecting, you simply feel it. You let it be as it is, without trying to fix or control it. As you stay present with the raw sensation, without engaging the mental commentary, the energy begins to move. Sometimes this movement is subtle, like a soft release. Other times it can be intense, with waves of emotion surfacing and subsiding. What matters is that you remain as the witnessing presence, allowing the flow to complete itself. Over time, this practice creates a fundamental shift in your relationship to your experiences. Instead of avoiding discomfort, you open to it. Instead of contracting in fear, you rest in awareness. As the backlog of stored energy clears, you find yourself living with greater ease, clarity, and resilience. The nervous system recalibrates to a state of balance, and the heart begins to open. Life is experienced more directly, without the heavy filters of past conditioning. This process is not linear, and it has nothing to do with perfection. Old patterns may resurface, not because the work has failed, but because the field is ready to release deeper layers. This is important to remember. It's easy to assume that running into the same obstacles means no progress has been made. But that isn't true. Each time you bring awareness to an energetic knot, it weakens. The more you stay present without resisting or reacting, the more of it is released. With every moment of presence, you strengthen your capacity to remain open. Energy that was once bound begins to move freely again. Over time, this shift becomes a natural way of living, where experiences are allowed to pass through without interference, and life is met with openness and trust. Living with fewer blockages is not about chasing high states, even if these states will likely occur as a byproduct of the practice. It's instead about resting more fully in the simplicity of what is. As blockages dissolve, life becomes lighter and more fluid. Emotional reactions soften, relationships become less entangled, and the sense of struggle fades. What remains is a quiet stability, a grounded presence that is not dependent on circumstances. From this state, love, creativity, and clarity flow naturally, because they are the qualities of unimpeded consciousness. The journey of releasing energetic blockages is, in essence, the journey of remembering who you are, beyond the patterns of conditioning. The field of consciousness does not need to be created. It only needs to be uncovered. It is your true, unchanging nature. Every time you allow a wave of energy to pass through without resistance, you take a step toward this uncovering. Over time, the accumulation of these moments of surrender creates a life that is more open, spacious, and aligned with the truth of your being. In summary, energetic blockages are the frozen remnants of past experiences that have not been fully allowed. They appear in the body as tension, in the mind as restless or repetitive thought, and in the energetic field as knots or contractions. In Hawkins' work, these blockages are seen as the root of many patterns of suffering, and in the yogic tradition, they are described as samskaras, impressions that keep life looping in familiar ways until awareness dissolves them. Left unconscious, they bind attention to the body and senses and reinforce the ego's struggle to control. When you begin to release them through the simple act of letting go, the nervous system softens, awareness expands, and life is no longer confined by the same filters. The path is not about effort, but about willingness, allowing what arises without resistance or identification. Over time, this becomes a way of living where energy flows freely, old loops lose their hold, and the natural qualities of clarity, openness, and love shine through. What you discover is not something new, but the truth of what has always been, that you are not limited to the conditioned patterns of the past, but part of an infinite field of awareness. Finally, let's return to the essence. Blockages perpetuate cycles of behavior and draw the same kinds of experiences into your life again and again. This is vital to understand because it holds the key to breaking free from repetition. These patterns operate unconsciously, and we are rarely as aware of our inner and outer responses as we imagine. Only when we begin to pay close attention do we see how much of life is being shaped by unresolved energy. Unprocessed emotions set up patterns of attraction and aversion that quietly influence choices and keep the same dynamics repeating. Life circles back to familiar situations, not because fate requires it, but because stored energy seeks resolution. The way out is not through effort or willpower, but through awareness and release. As trapped energy dissolves, the pull of old patterns weakens, and a new freedom to respond consciously emerges. At the same time, releasing blockages reveals something deeper. Beneath all the layers of contraction and conditioning lies an unchanging field of pure awareness, a silent presence untouched by any experience. As blockages fall away, this reality is no longer hidden. It is recognized directly as the truth of who and what you are. In that recognition, you do more than end repetitive cycles. You also loosen identification with the body, the brain, and the five-sense lens, allowing your greater nature, far beyond the fears and reactivity of the ego, to come into view. Here, life is no longer about survival and control. You are no longer clinging, forcing, resisting, and struggling, but instead opening, letting go, and allowing expansion. If you found this video helpful, you might enjoy exploring more. We have a playlist dedicated to the works of David Hawkins, which you'll find on the end screen. You'll also see a playlist on Joe Dispenza, whose approach focuses on calming the nervous system and connecting with the field of possibility through meditation and neuroscience. And there's a video on self-observation in the fourth way system, a practical method developed to help you notice your unconscious reactions in everyday life. Together, these perspectives complement each other and give you more tools for understanding and releasing the patterns that hold you back. You've now reached the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe, and check out the description and comment section to see other things that we do. Thank you for your time.